Hey, middle-aged gamers, welcome back. I'm here today because the fan is not here, so Antoine gets to have a break and stop using that sexy voice. Otherwise, so lots of stories happening. If you didn't know, we had an extra recording session this past weekend, so keep an eye out for those videos launching from December 17th and upwards. So 3 extra videos will be recording over the next 3 weekends. With that being said, you might have seen lots of stories popping up on PC Gamer, lots of stories on regular news, and Antoine's going to talk to us about one of them.
So I was the Game Awards, yes, this beautiful gaming award where your vote doesn't count for 10% and 90% are journalists telling you what they think about what you should like. Anyway, that's not what I'm supposed to talk about today anyway. Yes, so what we have seen is that the Game Award did something which makes them rather irrelevant for me right now. They decided, and they didn't communicate at all, they just put it in and they think, like a side note, hey, change of rules. Starting this year, we're allowing DLC to be nominated for Game of the Year. Just to remind you, yes, DLC, which of course have their own category, right? Which is, there's something called Best Ongoing Game category, which include Destiny 2, The Final Shape, and Diablo 4, Vessel of Hatred. So yes, it's more like live services game more than DLC. I agree on this. And you could create a pure DLC category, but they did this for one and only thing, of course, and it's Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which, yeah, I know you're happy about it. I'm not, because it's a DLC. And it's not a brand new IP. It's not something that studios spend 8 years developing. It's the continuation of the same story. So it's not a new game. Yes, it's grand. It's fantastic. And if they win Elden Ring, I remind you, won 2 years ago Game of the Year. So if Elden Ring 2, Elden Ring, it's not Elden Ring 2, sorry, my bad. 1.5, it's a DLC. Win, then for me, that's irrelevant. Last year, same Game of the World, I was criticizing the fact that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was nominated because I was saying that's more or less a DLC, right? That's a brand new adventure, but that's still the same world and everything. Here, there's not even this line in the sand. No, that's a DLC right here, Game of the Year award nominated. I find it very strange and discrediting for a lot of studio, right? Because you only have, 5 or 6 nomination on a very wide pool of game, and now you include DLC. Was it Phantom Liberty or something like this on Cyberpunk last year? Why they couldn't have been nominated then? Because same as Shadow of the Erdtree, that was a very big DLC. I don't know how much loved it was, but that was a rather big thing as well. But now I found it rather unfair. If I try to find some good thing about it, maybe that would force, and would people spend lots of money just for an award, but maybe that would force studio to really try to clean their DLC, try to add more content and make it maybe something more than just a cash grab. Because that's what it is for me. DLC is a cash grab on the game which worked. Because if the game didn't work, there's no need for a DLC. I completely refute the fact that I have a cash grab in my list of nominations. That's my little, yeah, I'm a little peeved, is that how you say politely, about this? And more than that, it's really the fact that did you guys knew it? I just read someone talk about it, say, hey, did you know that the Game Award put it in the FAQ? As a side note, hey, I'm not going to say it too loud, but yes, it's, now you can have DLC in your Game Award. No. If you want to do this, create a new category. You already have 22 or 23 category. What's one more, right? No, not really happy about this. So honestly, what do you guys think? For me, that's a very bad move on their part.
Yeah, no, because I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I've been on some forums talking about Armored Core recently. And it could remind me that specifically with From Software, there has always been historically, not always, but historically, there has been a vague line between DLC and a sequel, specifically in Armored Core, not necessarily in their other franchises, but in Armored Core specifically, because say you would have Armored Core, and then you had Armored Core Phantom, what was it, Project Phantasma, and then Armored Core Masters of the Arena. But the thing is, those games came out on the original PlayStation where DLC was not a thing because you couldn't download anything. So what they would do is they would release almost like an expansion game, but the expansion was independent. So like you didn't need the base game to play it. So in a way it's a sequel, but it's actually connected to the original because all your stuff from the original save will carry over into the new game. But I think that is a distinction there in that those were standalone games. I could play Armored Core, or I could play Armored Core 2, or I could play Armored Core 2 Another Age. I never, like if I played Armored Core 2, my friend could buy Another Age and play Another Age, and they would never have to play Armored Core 2. It was entirely standalone. And something like Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree is not standalone. The only way to get it is to buy the base game of Elden Ring. And so I think that is the distinction there. For instance, you were talking about like Tears of the Kingdom, right? Where with Tears of the Kingdom, you don't need to have played Breath of the Wild. You can just buy Tears of the Kingdom and play it without ever touching, was it Breath of the Wild? And so in that sense, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's an in-engine sequel. So I would say it is a distinct game. It's using the same engine, it's using a lot of the same assets, but it is a distinct game. I don't have to, if I wanted to play it this year, I don't have to buy the Breath of the Wild and then play through that, or at least own that as well. Whereas with Shadow of the Erdtree, yes, you do have to buy Elden Ring. So if you didn't have it already, you can't just jump in here. You have to buy the original game, or kind of like their Game of the Year edition or whatever that has all the content. But yeah, I think that would be the distinction for me as to whether a game is a true sequel or a game is a DLC, is can I buy this independently, or can this function independently of the first game? So say something like Fallout 3 versus Fallout New Vegas, two games, both in the same engine, but completely independent of each other. You could buy one, you could buy the other, you could buy both, you could buy, yeah. But yeah, I think like the Phantom Liberty is a perfect example because I hadn't even thought of it. But yeah, the fact that it was listed under best ongoing game, whereas Shadow of the Erdtree is not an ongoing game, it's its own game. And I think that's really shady kind of things. But I've heard a lot of people talking about how Jeff Keighley does play favorites, and he does have his favorites, and so he can do things as he wants, and it's his award show, which there is some logic to. But yeah, I don't think Shadow of the Erdtree should be nominated. I do think it gets a little fuzzy when people start talking about remakes. I think if it's something like The Last of Us 2 or something like that, where you're like, I'm going to port it to a new console, so I'm going to upgrade it, but I'm not going to make any fundamental changes to the game, I don't think that should count. Something like, say, Silent Hill or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or the Resident Evil remakes, I personally would count those simply because I feel like they fundamentally do change quite a bit. They add content. The gameplay has changed up a little bit between them. So those I think would be okay. Something that's just like basically a Last of Us remaster. And I think that's part of the problem now, is that there's just it's so muddied as what is a remaster? What is a remake? Because we just throw those terms around interchangeably. But no, I don't think Shadow of the Erdtree should have been nominated. It should have gone to something else, yeah.
Very cool. And with that note, let's move on. Adam, your first story, please.
So my first story is going to be about the PlayStation 5 Portable. Supposedly, this was just a couple days ago, not announced, but revealed, I guess, indirectly. I believe it was Bloomberg wrote a report on it. And basically what they were saying is that Sony has confirmed that there is in the works the plan to make they're trying to design a portable version of the PS5. So basically it would be like your PlayStation Portal, but it would actually be a PS5 in your hand. It wouldn't have to stream things. Now, this is several years away, so it is one of those things where it's, okay, is this actually ever going to come to fruition, or is this the kind of thing where they're like, oh, we're just working on it, but we don't have any current plans to actually release or not release? It's just, we're going to kind of see how it goes. That's not quite clear. We don't know when it's going to come out. The other thing that's going to come out is it being a few years out, that's looking like it might be launching alongside the PS6. What is that going to look like if it tries to launch side by side with the PS6? Is that going to be competition or what? So we don't really have too much information on it other than the fact that it is in development. That's basically the only information that we have. But I do have some questions about it. For example, my personal concerns The biggest one is going to be price point because, like, we talked about this a bit offline, so I guess we're going to have to rehash some old conversations here for the sake of the audience. But for my concern, I'm thinking if this is if it launches side by side with the PS6, if you're given the option, okay, I can get old gen tech, but I can have it in my hand, or I could have the new and shiny PS6. Which one are people going to want to buy? If they're at the same price point, I don't see this selling very well because I'm thinking people are going to want the new tech. They're going to want the PS6. They're going to want. I don't think that portability of an old console is going to offset the extra power of a new console and being able to get those next gen, whatever we have then, better ray tracing or 8K or whatever. I don't think it's going to be able to offset that necessarily. However, I do think that there will be a market for it in the sense that, for example, if you marketed it as kind of like a PS Vita, where it's okay, this is not your full home console. This is like a traditional handheld console. It's smaller, it's not quite as powerful. It's PS5 power, but by then we're going to be in PS6 power. PS5 power is going to be outdated, but you can carry over your PS5 library, take it on the go. And especially if they do what they did with the PS4, we're still getting games for the PS4 even now. So if we get cross-gen games, especially if they go back to doing cross-buy and cross-save, I could definitely see a market for this where they're like, okay, like for instance, we had GTA 5 on PS3 and PS4 and a PS5 version. So it's okay, GTA 7, or I don't know, we probably won't have 7 by then, right? It's going to be another 25 years until we get that. But whatever game comes out, maybe Red Dead 3 or something. If you have a PS6 version and they have a PS5 version, it's okay. You can play the portable PS5 version in your hand, or you can go and then you can just upload your save to the cloud, download your save real quick, and then continue playing on your PS6 in 8K. And I could see a market for that, but I do think that you'd have to market it as a peripheral. And as such, the price would have to be reduced. I don't think you could charge a full console price and expect this to be very successful alongside a PS6. I just don't, I personally don't think that would work. I know Korean has different opinions on that. But yeah, for me, it's who's your target audience here? Is your target audience going to be, we want people who don't have a PS5 getting a PS5 Portable? Or is it going to be, we want people who are getting a PS6 to have this on the side? It's one of those things where, is this your primary thing that we want people to buy? Or is this a secondary thing like on the side?
For me, Sony always had the wrong strategy on handheld. Because for me, a PSP or a Vita or something, it was always where you would put the trashy suite, the trashy sequel of a game. If you watch a Disney and you see the Little Mermaid, oh, great movie. And then you have the sequel for cash grab, Little Mermaid 2 and 3, which are, don't want to say completely crap because I haven't seen them, but clearly it doesn't have the same success. So you put it on another platform. For me, it was that. Like you had FF12 on your PlayStation, and then you get some FF12 whatever story I can't remember for the handheld, or you had the Valkyria Chronicle, and then you put 2 and 3 on. It never. I'm gonna take you 30 years back. I know that's a lot. Do you want your little Game Boy with no backlit screen, a screen like this in black and white? Or do you want your Super Nintendo, right? You know what? On the Game Boy, there's Pokemon Red and Blue, which I don't have anywhere else. And that's an extremely powerful IP, which is gonna make me buy a Game Boy, an Advance SP, a 2DS, a 3DS, and etc. It built the whole mobile console around an IP, which Sony does not know how to do. Like Tetris, right? You have Tetris on your NES or Super NES? No, you have it on Game Boy, and it's a hit. Before you tried thinking, do I want a mobile handheld or PS6 for the same price point? What's the advantage the mobile would have other than the fact that it's mobile, that's like a Switch, you can put it on your TV or something? What makes me want to buy? Why is it that I love PlayStation and I never bought a 5? Because there's no powerful IP which makes me want to buy it. Until they talked about Ghost of Yotei, but that's a different story. But see, you need, for me, these consoles, like in a train, they are the fancy dining car. It's great to have a dining car, but if you don't have a locomotive to pull the train forward, you go nowhere. And that's exactly what it is for me. You need a powerful new IP to have your console take off. And Sony is very bad at that. That's the problem. They were very good on the PS4 with Ghost of Tsushima, which sold lots of console. At the very beginning, I think they also have a Nathan Drake, please help me, Uncharted series. I got the limited Uncharted edition. There are some strong IPs, and on PS5, I never found the same hype for this kind of. I never found the IP which makes me want to buy a PS5. It's gonna be the same problem on PS6. Gonna be the same problem on mobile. You want me to buy it? Cool. You have the hardware. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. Really, it's still expensive. But why would I buy it? I have my PC, I have the Game Pass. Sell it to me. What are you gonna put on that console which makes me want to buy it? Nintendo is excellent at it. Xbox, because of their multiplayer universe, is very good at it. Sony is completely losing its touch these days because they just can't sell on Square Enix Final Fantasy. This is gone for me. So they need to find something else. My take, at least.
I think the thing that, Adam, you guys are not into that, right? Is to me, the change was not the games that came with the Nintendo Switch or the games that are going to come with a potential PS5 handle. It's just the handheld experience. That's just plain it. I just got my Steam Deck on Saturday, last week sometime, right? Last week, right? And literally, as much as I was enjoying Dragon Age Inquisition, I dropped it like a hot rock. Dragon Age Inquisition is done. I am back to handheld gaming, and dude, it just feels much better. It's a much better experience for me. I feel like sitting in front of a TV, even if you're sitting on a couch with a control, doesn't feel nice or comfortable. Just sitting on the chair, just looking at the screen, it just feels more natural. I have no idea, but the thing I can say is what's taken off is handhelds, right? You look at from the Switch to the original Steam Deck, right? The LCD version of the Steam Deck to now we have almost every single GPU manufacturer has made their own device. Zotac, MSI, people have made the devices. You've got the Chinese companies, the Aya Neo series, which is like now the second class devices. But handheld gaming is only expanding. And as I was arguing with Adam yesterday we're discussing online, it's like, to me, the market for this is just people who are like, I don't want a PlayStation 5. I don't want this big device. I don't want to sit in front of a TV. I just want to take this on my commute, or I want to play this secretly at work, or I want to take this when I go to the beach, right? Or I want to sit in the park and play this. It's a good feeling, honestly. And it looks so good. And like playing the Steam Deck, I have the OLED version and it is massive. It is heavy, but it was still fun. And it is just going back 30 years ago, right? When gaming in the 90s. And I'm like, wow, this experience is now in my hands. Or even I can play, like I talked about I Am Future last week, and I was playing I Am Future on my Steam Deck, and it runs well, and it looks beautiful. And to me, that's where I think PlayStation is gonna corner the market, in my opinion again, for a AAA experience, handheld experience, where there's no fiddling like you have to do with all the other handhelds except the Steam Deck. And you get this brilliant catalog of single-player, high-quality experiences that Sony's going to make sure they're optimized, like Valve has done with Steam Deck Verified, where anything that has Steam Deck Verified that means you can see the text, the game plays well, the controls all mapped out, you don't have to play around with the controls or anything like that. And I think, honestly, I would consider getting a Sony handheld just because it'd be a nice chance. But we'll see how that plays out in the future.
Yeah, for me, it's just going to come down to price. If it's the same price as a PS6, I'm like, oh, can I justify it? Because I'm going to want a PS6 100%. And I think most of the PlayStation market's going to want a PS6. I don't think they're going to say, especially if you already have a PS5, I don't think you're going to be like, I could buy a PS6 or I could just buy a second PS5. It's just portable. But I already have a PS5. I don't see a lot of people jumping on that over a PS6. So I feel like you'd have to market it as like a secondary console, not a primary console, to get people on board. That's just my opinion.
I disagree, right? That will turn this 1 hour show into something much longer. But I'm excited. I hope they get something right, because it'd be nice to have some other competitor besides the top tier solutions right now would be Asus at the top. Like I was telling you, Asus's top model is $800. I can easily see Sony charging that for a handheld, which has the equivalent hardware inside. Moving on to my first story for today. This was an interview done with a former Xbox executive who has basically said, game developers or the game industry is in a bubble at the moment. And the TLDR is basically game developers don't listen to consumers anymore or gamers. They make a game for their view of way things should be, right? And I see it, but at the same time, I don't. I think the game industry, or gaming, as I was writing out my notes for this yesterday, I've come to the realization that gaming has expanded so much that, yes, as a game developer, you can make games in a bubble, which is fine because there's going back to when gaming was super niche again, going back to the 90s, right? Where it was like, hey, if you're a gamer, you're a nerd or you're an introvert and now you see so many people gaming on so many different devices with so many different stories and IPs, and you have games for every single person. So I don't think gaming has become more niche, but more along the lines of it looks like it's becoming devs are in a bubble because it has become so expansive and so many people, and the industry continues to rack up billions upon billions of dollars in revenue every single year. There are definitely, I think, bigger studios who do make things, who are in sort of a bubble. Yes, I'm going to make this game and this game, example, Truck and Call of Duty, right? And every single time I make a Call of Duty, it's going to be 25% better. And that's good enough because we're making money, right? And there might be people doing other IPs which do the same thing, right? But anyway, I think we're not going to change. I think possibly in the next 5 years, we're going to get a change in the industry in the sense of saying, hey, making a game every single year, like in the case of Ubisoft, right? There's been a big pushback against making yearly Assassin's Creeds, right? I think that has to change. Call of Duty, on the other side, I think is not going to change from a yearly IP just because it continues to make so much money, because the esports behind it is still quite popular in terms of views. Maybe that doesn't make money, as we know about esports. But anyway, I'd be interested to hear, Antoine, what do you think? Is the gaming industry in a bubble?
In a bubble, no, there was definitely a bubble during COVID time because everybody was stuck at home with nothing to do. Clearly, it spread the joy of gaming to a large audience which would have never discovered gaming otherwise. And after this, of course, so that was the COVID bubble, and then it burst. If you're still playing video game at this time, like 4 years after, and then I think you're going to keep playing for a very long time. Yeah, no, definitely. So I don't think it's in a bubble. It's in a steady trend going upward. And as you said, we'll have more PlayStation, more handheld device, more competition on the market. At some point, I'm pretty sure that new players are going to come in. No, it's honestly a steady trend for me and no bubble. If there was a bubble, that was during COVID and it's already passed.
And then the other question, Antoine, do you think developers have stopped listening to gamers?
Oh, they never listen to gamers. Sorry, didn't say that. Depends. Are we talking about AAA games where it's like Netflix? I need this kind of character, this kind of random fun, not same story as usual, just change the skin. Oh, I have a Far Cry 6. Oh, sorry. And no, they just tick boxes because it's too long to create, too much money, too much interest in there. They're gonna try maybe to change the gameplay here and there, but AAA games developers are not listening to you. They're listening to your shareholders, right? If we're talking about indie gaming, though, they need to listen to people who play the game because they need to sell. So they launch an early access and they are Subnautica. So here's my game. I think it's pretty good. What do you guys think? Oh, you could add this and this. Oh, this makes sense. I can add it. And it's requested by many people. So that's a nice addition. This is completely stupid. So let's forget it. And they can just pick whatever there is. Dev who listen to their community. That's not the big ones. That's clearly not the big ones. The big ones can't afford to listen to the community. Unless it's a big cancel culture, concord, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but otherwise, no. It's not like they don't want to. I'm sure the developers who are creating the game, they are reading the forums like you and me, and they're like, oh, that could be great. Hey, boss, can we do that? They said no. Oh, okay. And that's it. Ask Peter Molyneux. He does whatever he wants with his game. He doesn't listen to you. He listens to his inner voice.
Good example. Adam, what's your take?
No, I read the article, and I think they had some really good points. To use the example that they specifically mentioned, Dragon Age Veilguard. And so they were talking about how when it just feels like the development teams a lot of times do feel very detached from their audience. For example, we've seen Arrowhead do it with Helldivers. We've seen the teams from Veilguard do it. I'm trying to think of other games that have done it. There have been quite a few stories over the past year where fans will lay down criticism, perhaps harshly, but then the dev teams do act in an unprofessional way and basically start name calling, and they're like, "You guys are idiots and chuds, and you guys need to screw off because you don't know art if it bit you in the ass." And then that, of course, disenfranchises your audience, and they're like, "Wait, why do I want to buy your game again? Why do I want to give you money?" And so yeah, we've seen that from several developers this year doing that. And we've seen some people, we've seen a couple layoffs of social media managers as a result of that. But then also too, like the other thing they were talking about is that there's this feedback loop. Like for instance, with Dragon Age, like they were saying specifically with Dragon Age Veilguard, they basically came out when they were developing the game and they're like, okay, this is what we want people to think of when they think of our game. And one of the lines that they specifically said in Veilguard was a return to form for BioWare. And because a lot of times, like for instance, if I'm a journalist and I work with a developer, at first that might be a professional relationship, but over time, if I continue working with them, that just naturally develops into a friendship. That's how humans work, right? The more we socially interact, the more attached we get to each other. And so I'm not talking to this person professionally. I'm talking to a friend. And this goes back to like with the Game Awards with Jeff Keighley, right? Being like a huge fan of Hideo Kojima, and now he just advertises Hideo Kojima everywhere, right? Always has these big things with Death Stranding and all that because they're friends. And so they were saying like the BioWare people are like, we want this. And so if you went through a lot of the reviews, it was ton of the reviews were using that exact phrasing, a return to form for BioWare. And that wasn't because that wasn't a reporter generating that on their own. That was a reporter talking to the people at BioWare who they have a good relationship with. And even if they're not necessarily friends, it's one of those things where if I give you an interview and I give you a good interview that you're happy with, you're more likely to accept my request for an interview in the future. Whereas if I wrote something bad, you're probably next time you're gonna be like, nah, I don't want to do an interview with you. So they want to maintain that relationship. So they post these positive things, and then the developers are like, oh yeah, see, everything's going great. All these media outlets are saying how great we're doing. And then because of that, it creates this, so everything we're doing is fine. And then so they continue working on it, and then they talk to the press, and the press is like, oh yeah, let's get another interview. This is fantastic. You guys are doing great. But then when it goes to actual fans, then it doesn't reflect in that. And again, the example was Dragon Age Veilguard, for example. When it first came out, IGN released this glowing review of a 9 out of 10. And then, for instance, and then people were talking about sales, and they're like, "Oh, look, the quickest selling EA game on Steam ever." But they're ignoring the fact that this is the first time that a game has launched on Steam. There's never been a launch game on Steam. So now we're getting news like these many weeks later that actually it's selling more slowly than Dragon Age Inquisition. So it's not selling as well as previous Dragon Age games. It's just selling better than EA games that have never traditionally sold on Steam at launch. But because that's a positive thing, that's what is reported. And so they're like, oh, yeah, see, this game is super successful. And then later on, it's, oh, wait, maybe it's not quite as doing as well as it looked like it was at first. And so they're talking about how there's this kind of this feedback loop. And that's the bubble, is that they're not listening to people outside their group. They're listening to their friends. They're listening to the people that they work with. And because of it, then it becomes very confusing when things don't succeed, because you're like, wait, everybody told me that everything was great. Everybody told me that everything was fine. But then it turns out that you're surrounded by a bunch of yes men. So you're blindsided when something doesn't work out. And I do think that's an issue. And I have seen that happening this year quite a bit with quite a few developers. So yeah, I do think it's a thing.
All right, and on that note, Antoine, why don't you lead us off with your last story for today?
All right, imagine a little Christmassy jingle like a I'm thinking of you and myself, of course, because we are deep into the Black Friday sale and you want to get something for your little ones who want the latest games, right? I'm gonna talk to you about Sonic's and Shadows or Sonic's X Shadow, I don't know how you call it, which is released on Switch, PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. And this generation, so I'm going to call the new generations because there was a generation released, what, 10, 15 years ago, maybe more. So this new generation has been a massive hit at launch, and that's not a journalist being friendly with Sega, right? It's just Sega did an excellent job, right? And yes, including the early access on day one, they already had sold 1 million copies, which is not bad. After months, they sold 1.5 million copies, which is even more than Frontier did. Just to give you a little comparison, right? Generations, so Sonic Generations, the old one, sold 1.85 million copy in 6 months. Sonic Frontier, which is 2019, 2020, something like this, sold 2022, sorry, 2022, much closer, 3.5 million copy in 6 months. And this Sonic's X Shadow, after not too long, actually 1 month, something like this, is already selling more than Frontier. So traditionally Sonic, I don't know if it's traditional or not, but I realize that they always, most of them are released on November. And they are looking at their sales 6 months, so we're going to check that in May 2025. But at this time, Sonic's X Shadow Generations is the fastest selling 3D Sonic ever, which is grand because I recall that Sonic was dying 10 years ago. I'm very happy for them to come back. We talked about Sonic earlier with the Olympics, saying that they broke their deal with Sonic and Mario at the Olympic Games, that it was finished, and also I was afraid of poor old Sonic, and apparently it went great. So I don't know if it's the fact that Generations was a very loved game, that Frontier worked very well, so people trust Sega for making a great Sonic, or is it the fact that Sonic 3 with Shadow will come out in cinema, and then right now there's a big hype over this Shadow character, which is pretty cool and dark and edgy. And he's so powerful and immortal. And anyway, Shadow is one of the most loved characters in the Sonic universe at this time. Yeah, that's my little. So basically, that's my little pick for your Christmas shopping. I've seen it at minus 40%. I think, was it on Steam? No, sorry, on Nintendo Switch and PlayStation version. So I know it's on sale on. Was it on Steam as well? Don't take my word for it, just check. But for the other two, like Switch and PlayStation, it's minus 40%, although it was only released a month ago, so a very big deal. If you want to please your little one, for not so little and hopefully mainly likely a boy, because I'm not sure Shadow is really resonating with little girls. But that's clearly my recommendation of the day. I think it's going to be great, and I'm seriously considering it as well for my kids. So if, of course, you have any recommendation for Christmas and everything, if you see something fantastic on Black Friday, put it in the comments, for not just for us, for the guys. We do have more than 1,500 subscribers, so I'm sure that some people will like to see the latest deals, even if it's super niche, right? We always talk Sonic is very mainstream, so if there's something very niche and you saw and you're like, you guys need to try that, like the hidden gems. We haven't done hidden gems in a while. We always like these. All those, sorry, my English is gone, so it's late. Yeah, please put in the comments. We would love to have your advice. Guys, anything you want to recommend for Christmas?
Adam?
Christmas caught me unprepared. Yeah.
It's okay if you don't have
Mini
anything,
games.
that's all right.
Yeah, really. Gift Slitter had a shot, but it's not going to be for everybody. I will say that.
No, I was thinking it's a little girl, Slitterhead.
Oh, for little girls specifically?
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I was thinking kid, but
Yeah, Shadow is everything is about Maria, right? He's all about the little girls. Yeah, that's his whole motivation, is trying to help Maria or save her or whatever.
Oh, thank you, because it didn't come out quite right at first.
Yeah, no. And while I was wording it, I was like, how do I word this and make it not sound terrible? I can't think of a way to not make it sound bad. But he does it for
Yes,
he does
he
it for
care very
Maria. He's
much.
all about that's his whole motivation, right? He's there. He's there for you. He's a protector. But no, a game for kids. Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's plenty out there.
Yeah, exactly. That's all right. Just take your Switch catalog, and I'm sure that you will have a lot of interesting things.
Yeah. Yeah, I never got into the 3D Sonics. I don't know. For me, it was always I liked the 2D ones. I played Sonic Mania. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, the 3D ones, I don't know. I guess because the gameplay for me felt a lot like Subway Surfer, which is just something I was never all that into.
You never tried Sonic Adventures?
Sonic Adventure was probably the only 3D game that I really played all that much of, and I liked the open world kind of stuff, but I don't know. It felt like either I was going slow and I wasn't being really Sonic-y, or it was going really fast, but then it felt like it was on rails, and I just never got into it in the same way that I got into the originals.
All right, and your final story for today?
So my final story for today is more news. Supposedly, Sony might be buying out Kadokawa. So if you don't know who that is, they're the company that controls From Software. So a lot of people in the gaming community are really freaking out because they're like, "Uh-oh, it looks like another acquisition's on the line, another acquisition's out here." But actually, there's a lot more to this story than we originally thought. So it turns out that probably the biggest reason Sony wants Kadokawa is not for the gaming, but rather for the anime, because Kadokawa owns a lot of anime IPs, and Sony wants to boost her Crunchyroll. So they probably want that so that they'll be able to bolster their Crunchyroll, which actually in the West has caused a lot of people to panic and like, oh my God, Sony making a huge acquisition like that? This is monopolistic behavior. This is not good. However, oddly enough, in Japan, people are not concerned because Crunchyroll is very small compared to a lot of other streaming services in Japan. And there's dozens of them in Japan. Maybe there's not so many over in the West, but there are tons of anime streaming services over in Japan, which makes us not even remotely close to a monopoly there. Maybe here, but not there. However, as some people have been pointing out online, it still wouldn't be a monopoly because if we're looking at subscriber counts, Netflix at 283 million, Amazon at roughly 200 million, Disney Plus 154 million, Max at 110 million, Hulu at 50 million. Any guess what Crunchyroll is?
10 million? 10, 15?
Crunchyroll is a whopping 15 million. It's not that many at all. And so because yeah, you're pretty close with with 10. So they're 15 million. So they're barely scratching these subscriber counts. And obviously Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and Max have tons of anime offerings as well. So as far as a monopoly, they're not really a threat. But of course, obviously from the gaming perspective, a lot of people are worried. Are they going, if they do own From Software, are they just going to say, hey, you know what, From Software, you're just doing Bloodborne style stuff where it's going to be PlayStation only from here on out? And obviously that's really shady. I'm in the same boat I was with Blizzard and Activision and Bethesda, where I'm like, you know what, I'm not for it, but as long as you keep your games multi-platform, I'm fine, especially old IPs. I do think From Software is a little bit different though than say the Bethesda, because with Bethesda, something like Starfield, fine, it's a new IP, I don't really care. But Elder Scrolls, absolutely, I want those to be multi-platform. But From Software is a little bit different because I feel like they're not even just about one franchise or two franchises. They basically corner the market on an entire genre. There are a few games that have broken out, like Lies of P, that are successful. But I think if From Software went exclusive, that Soulsborne genre as a whole would be hit really hard. In my opinion, if PlayStation was to go, say, the Bungie route, and they're like, hey, you know what? You're technically under us, but you can do what you want and develop what you want for who you want, fine. But ultimately, I'm not that big into acquisitions. But there is one last piece of this puzzle. It looks like actually Sony did not approach Kadokawa about this. Kadokawa approached Sony and said, hey, would you like to buy us out? Which seems really odd, but apparently the reasoning is that actually Kakao, which is a Korean company, has been aggressively buying up stock in Kadokawa recently, and Kadokawa was actually afraid of a hostile takeover. And Sony being another Japanese company, because it's really hard to buy out Japanese companies. They have a lot of these laws where they can't be sold to other companies, especially companies that are based in other countries. Kadokawa was like, uh-oh, if these guys buy too much stock, we could have a hostile takeover on our hands. Hey, Sony, this other Japanese company, how would you feel about buying us out? And that would basically keep the company Japanese. And so it looks like that actually might be the reason for it. Not Sony wanting to bolster Crunchyroll, but rather Kadokawa saying, hey, we want to remain Japanese. And Sony being like, it's actually a pretty good idea. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I really do hope, as I said, that they keep basically all their games multi-platform. I know a lot of people are really hoping for Bloodborne 2, so maybe if From Software is under Sony, they'll finally be getting that. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting news, so figured I'd report on it.
Yeah, I'm wondering what content's gonna update on that. This minority shareholder, but I think they got about 30% of
It's a pretty big chunk, yeah.
Yeah,
It's even higher than Sony.
right? Yeah, maybe cheap one. Anyway, in the case, instead of them giants, I'm not sure especially I'm not just buying. Gotta go anyway. But the captains of the other, I don't know. Maybe you that the board of about the marine version. That's interesting. And I might give these stories when it's very hard to keep this. But I don't mind me to watch. As an interesting in the English. Maybe certain instrument when translated, that's annoying.
Never used it in Kadokawa until I recently got into Crunchyroll. I subscribed 2 weeks ago here in Taiwan. Super affordable because just like as someone who's been on Netflix and Disney Plus, actually their anime offerings are pretty. There's no more than 20 titles on each platform. It's not that much. Literally why I gave up on Disney Plus, because there was like literally no more anime for me to watch. Netflix was the same. Netflix gets in a few titles every quarter at the most. But Crunchyroll, like it does say, hey, we have the latest shows from the full season, and they do. And it's so hard to get anime, honestly. If you're not, like if you're doing Netflix in Taiwan, if you're doing Netflix or you're doing Disney Plus in Taiwan, if you're in a locked region, maybe you could get some other access if you did a VPN or something like that. But that, I mean, to me, this makes sense. On the subject of Tencent's stock price has been flat for the whole of this year. I just looked up their 1-year stock chart and it's literally not moved above $50 a share for the last year, between that band of 50 and 60. That tells you, man, that company's got issues. I would say if you're Tencent, if this minority stake in Kadokawa is not doing anything out there to sell it, they need the money, especially given how poor the Chinese economy is doing, right? They need to put their money into things that are going to make them money, make their shareholders money, and improve value for the company, right? So that stock price can actually move after the last year. Because if I was a Tencent shareholder, I'd be like, yeah, what are you guys doing? Anyway, on that financial note, I want to talk about my last story so we can finish on time today. My last story is a game called Trash Goblin, which is living your fantasy of being a paleontologist or archaeologist. It is a game I saw on Kickstarter, and it was one of those games where I'm like, how many games have you kickstarted this year, Korean? I don't know. I don't remember at all. Maybe another one would work. But I didn't. I withheld. And now it is in early access. Trash Goblin is a game made by Spilt. I keep wanting to read this as Split, but it's Spilt Milk Studios. This is their first quote-unquote big game. They've published 8 or 9 other games, but they're all these really small games that you might not have heard of. This is a game I would say is probably the biggest game compared to some of the other games. Trash Goblin didn't make the millions of dollars, but they did make, I think, 100,000 or 200,000 or so. I can't quite remember. But basically, this is a game where you're like a goblin in like a fantasy setting, and you take trash or these like artifacts, and you like take a pick and you're picking away at it, and then you have this, after it's broken up, you have this like thing like an earring or like a statue or like an idol or something like that, and then you sell it to people, right? Hey, I repaired this stuff, this is nice, please buy it from me. You can also combine these things, so you might get like a statue, you might get some like horns, you combine them into this other statue and then sell this to someone else. The usual stuff for me, right? It's got this cool art style, but I love this aspect of this game is just, you're in the trailer that you watch, you're at your desk, you're tapping away, and then you swivel around to the customer stand, and then you're back at your desk, and it's such a seamless experience. One thing I will say that this is a Kickstarter game, and this is their first Kickstarter. So what that means is there are caveats doing a Kickstarter. And they said even on the early access for Steam, one of the things I find as a warning label is, hey, we don't know how long we're going to be in early access. And so if you're someone who's been on Steam a long time, I've been on Steam, oh my God, it's like the last 20 years or so, you will see games that are like, yeah, we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and E, and F for this game, and they never get down to it, is one problem. And they're like, okay, game's done, we're releasing it. Or the second thing is, you know what? We've run out of money, and now we're canceling the game. But now, in this age of Steam refunds and stuff, and Steam being a lot more proactive, and maybe just they don't want to get sued, is that if someone does give up on a Steam Early Access, right, there is a good chance Steam will refund your money, or Steam will give you partial refund, or will strengthen up the rules for the next person. That being said, this is a unique game. I don't know if Adam or Antoine know of a game like this, but this, to me, caught my eye. Just because, again, it's in that vein of cozy, relaxing, stress-free games. I will say, on the side note, I Am Future is not stressful because I have not figured out how to grow food in that game, and my character is continuously starving while I run around on this really beautiful world. But I'm like, where's the food? It's just steel and wood and stuff everywhere, which sucks. But anyway, Trash Goblin, it's out right now in early access. So if you're not an early access person, don't buy it, wait until it releases. The end game was supposed to be endless replayability, lots of different quests, lots of different things to do, side missions, different sort of objects that you can recover as you like tinkering away, for a lack of a better expression. It's about under $10 on Steam, depending where you are in the world. Something, again, already on my wish list. I don't pay early access anymore. But once it's released, it's going to be another game for the Steam Deck, so that I never have to sit at this computer again. Unless I talk to Adam and Anton. Or unless we play, what are we playing next year? Subnautica 2 co-op. That's the other choice. Yeah, guys, any final thoughts?
Just on Trash Goblin, it's $20 Canadian, but if you don't want to pay for it, there's a free demo, which I just downloaded. You lose nothing by getting it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this one before. It looks familiar.
I feel like I did. Like, I saw this and I'm like, I think I might have talked about it on a Kickstarter. All right, guys, before we end up today, how's the gaming going? What's been happening this week? Anton first.
Lots of work, so not much. I tried to play Ys 8. I tried to continue, but it's, I think, a very long game, which is very good. But definitely trying to cut my RPG with Raid. It's a kind of game which believes that if you do your story from point A to point B, you're going to get bored. So every time, every 2 hours, you have some beast raiding your village. So you have to stop what you're doing to go back to the village and beat up some monsters, which is great because at least you are not bored doing the same thing, but there's too much of it. I don't need to go back to the village every 2 hours. Let me play a little bit and advance the story. I don't have that much time. Otherwise, fantastic game. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, I'm mostly playing Persona 5 Strikers, catching up in Final Fantasy 14. They recently dropped the new patch. Yeah, so that was like a couple weeks ago. So I've been dabbling in that. And I just completed all the tasks in the Stellar Blade DLC. So I blazed through that pretty quick. So that's all done. And now my friends and I are finally getting into Baldur's Gate. That's fun. That's going to be fun.
All right, fantastic. And on that note, thank you everyone for tuning in. As always, thanks Adam and Antoine for pitching up and coming up with some really interesting stories and talking points. Thank you guys for watching this later. Thank you guys for tuning into Adam's live streams. As always, we will be here next week, Saturday. Our Saturday extra recording sessions are not live, but stay tuned for those when they do get released and edited towards the end of the year. And then we will see you back. We'll be recording until, I believe, December 13th. And then the last show will be somewhere around there, just before Adam gets on his plane to Virginia. And then otherwise, we'll see you guys in the new year. But anyway, see you guys next week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.